Young and the Restless. Spoilers full episodes, the 16th of March 2026. The glow of the laptop screen cast a harsh, unforgiving blue light across Nikki Newman's immaculate features. The sprawling, opulent study of the Newman Ranch was cloaked in the heavy, suffocating silence of 3 o'clock in the morning, but sleep was a luxury Nikki could no longer afford. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of her son Nick haunted her. He was spiraling the weight of Matt Clark's relentless psychological torture, pressing down on his shoulders until he was ready to crack. Victor had his own ruthless machinations in play, distracted by his unending war with Jack Abbott, but Nikki was a mother first. She refused to sit idly by in her ivory tower while a resurrected ghost from their past destroyed her boy. Her manicured fingers flew across the keyboard with a desperate, practiced precision. She had bypassed Newman Enterprises' official security protocols, utilizing a private, off-the-books investigator she'd kept on a shadow retainer for years. The encrypted files on Matt Clark's known associates were frustratingly sparse. Matt was a phantom moving through the darkest corners of Genoa City and beyond, leaving virtually no financial footprint. But Nikki knew better. Phantoms still needed to eat. They needed burner phones, untraceable safe houses, and mountains of laundered cash. Someone with deep pockets and a vast network was bankrolling him. As she sifted through the murky web of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and dummy LLCs, a chilling pattern began to emerge. A series of heavily redacted wire transfers originating from Nevada caught her eye. Attached to these transfers, buried deep within the encrypted chatter of the dark web, was a whisper of a name, an alias referred to only as the Queen of Diamonds. Nikki leaned closer to the screen, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had found the loose thread in Matt Clark's impenetrable armor. Now she just needed to pull it. By dawn, Nikki had transformed her maternal anxiety into ruthless, calculated action. She stood by the grand French doors of the study, a steaming cup of black coffee warming her trembling hands as she spoke into an untraceable burner phone. "I don't care what it costs, Paul," she murmured, her voice a steel blade wrapped in silk. "I want this Queen of Diamonds flushed out. Leak the alias to the underground. Let the bookies, the fixers, and the loan sharks know that the Newmans are looking for her. Put a bounty on her description if you have to. I want a name." For the next 48 hours, Nikki orchestrated a shadow campaign from the confines of the ranch. She planted rumors in the darkest corners of the criminal underworld, hoping to rattle the cage enough to make this mysterious woman slip up. The initial feedback from her network of informants painted a predictable, almost pathetic picture. The streets whispered that Matt Clark had simply picked up a new accomplice, some desperate, starry-eyed grifter he had seduced into doing his dirty work. A mule. A temporary pawn who was laundering his money, running his errands, and keeping his bed warm. "She's just a shield, Mrs. Newman," one gravel-voiced informant had relayed to Nikki's investigator. "Matt uses women and discards them when the heat gets too high. This one is no different. She's probably terrified of him, just trying to survive the ride." Nikki almost pitied the unknown woman. Almost. But if this accomplice was the key to finding Matt and ending the torment inflicted on Nick, Nikki would not hesitate to crush her. She authorized a transfer of $50,000 to double the financial incentive for a confirmed identity. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The sky over Genoa City was a bruised, violent purple mirroring the storm brewing inside the Newman matriarch. Nikki sat at the edge of the velvet sofa in her living room, her tablet chiming with a high-priority encrypted message. It was a single file, heavily password-protected. Nikki typed in the decryption key, her breath catching in her throat. The progress bar crawled across the screen agonizingly slow before finally snapping open to reveal a high-resolution surveillance photograph and a thick, detailed dossier. The woman in the photograph was not a desperate grifter. She was not a terrified pawn. She was standing outside a lavish neon-lit casino in Las Vegas, draped in a tailored designer coat, her expression one of absolute icy authority. Nikki's eyes dropped to the name printed in bold red letters beneath the photograph Times Risa Thompson asterisk. The tablet nearly slipped from Nikki's grasp, clattering against the glass coffee table. Risa Thompson. The name echoed in her mind, unlocking a vault of dark Newman family history that she had prayed was sealed forever. This wasn't a nobody. This was the woman who had harbored Adam during his missing years in Las Vegas. The woman who had managed his illegal high-stakes poker games when he had shed the Newman name, lost his memory, and lived as the underground legend known only as Spider. "My God," Nikki whispered to the empty, cavernous room. The implications were staggering. If Risa was involved with Matt Clark, the threat to her family was infinitely more complicated and dangerous than she had ever imagined. Driven by a potent mix of fear and adrenaline, Nikki plunged deeper into the dossier. What she found over the next hour shattered every assumption she had made about Matt Clark's operation. Risa Thompson was not merely an accomplice. She was not just running a few underground gambling rings to funnel cash to a fugitive. The financial records painstakingly decrypted by Nikki's team revealed a terrifying truth. Risa was the architect. She was utilizing her vast, impenetrable network in the Vegas underworld to shield Matt completely from the authorities. But it went much further than logistics. Risa was actively coordinating his dark activities. She was the one securing the untraceable narcotics that had recently plagued the city's underbelly. She was the one paying off the corrupt officials, silencing the potential witnesses, and orchestrating the psychological warfare against the Newman family. Matt Clark was the blunt instrument, the terrifying face of the terror, but Risa Thompson was the mastermind holding the leash. Nikki felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. Risa had evolved from a high-stakes poker hostess into a ruthless, untouchable syndicate boss, and she was using Matt Clark to wage a proxy war against Genoa City. But why? Was it strictly business, a power play, or was it a twisted, deeply personal vendetta tied to Adam's departure from her world? She couldn't keep this to herself. Not anymore. The stakes had just become deadly. I need both of you at the ranch. Now. No excuses, Nikki had demanded over the phone, her tone leaving no room for argument. Within the hour, Nick and Adam stood in the center of the Newman living room. The air between the two brothers was already thick, with their usual underlying tension exacerbated by the immense stress of the past few weeks. Nick looked haggard, the dark circles under his eyes, a testament to his sleepless nights and the secret agonizing demons he was battling just to stay upright. Adam stood rigid, his posture defensive, his sharp eyes darting around the room as he sensed the impending storm. "What is this about, Nikki?" Nick asked, his voice rough and laced with exhaustion. "If this is about Dad's latest move with Jack, I don't have the bandwidth for his corporate hostage games right now." "It's not about your father," Nikki interrupted, her voice uncharacteristically sharp, cutting through the air like a whip. She stepped forward and tossed the thick dossier onto the glass coffee table. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. "It's about Matt Clark. And the person who is keeping him alive and operational?" Adam's eyes narrowed as he looked down at the manila folder. "You found his backer." "I didn't just find her," Nikki said, staring directly at Adam, her gaze piercing. "I found out exactly who she is. Open it." Nick snatched the file from the table, flipping it open with aggressive force. His eyes scanned the first page, and the color instantly drained from his face. He looked up, his jaw clenched so tight it looked as though the bone might shatter under the pressure. Risa Thompson. He spat the name out like poison, the syllables tasting vile on his tongue. He turned his furious gaze on his brother. "Your old Vegas handler. The woman who babysat you when you were playing Spider." Adam stepped forward, snatching the file from Nick's hands. He stared at the photograph of Risa, a complex, turbulent wave of shock, denial, and betrayal washing over his features. This has to be a mistake. Risa runs games. She deals in information and high rollers. She doesn't deal with psychos, like Matt Clark. "Read the rest of it, Adam," Nikki commanded, her voice trembling with barely suppressed maternal rage. "She isn't just dealing with him. She's running him. The drugs, the extortion, the threats against this family, Risa is the bankroll and the brains. She's the key to everything. She's the reason Matt is always one step ahead of us." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the estate. Adam felt the floor tilt beneath his Italian leather shoes. He was suddenly violently transported back to the neon-drenched streets of Las Vegas, to the suffocating desert heat and the intoxicating thrill of living off the grid. Risa had been his protector. When he was Spider, lost in the dark recesses of his own amnesia and trauma, Risa had watched his back. She had been fear-loyal, a fixed point of gravity in a world of absolute chaos. To discover that she was now weaponizing her empire against his own family, aligning herself with a monster like Matt Clark, was a truth his mind violently rejected. Asterisk, did she know times? Adam wondered frantically, his eyes scanning the damning financial records. Asterisk, did she know Matt was targeting Nick? Or is Matt manipulating her? Does he have leverage on her? Asterisk. "I'm going to kill him," Nick snarled, shattering Adam's internal monologue. Nick began pacing the length of the room like a caged animal, his hands trembling with a volatile mixture of adrenaline and sheer panic. "And I'm going to burn her empire to the ground to do it. If she's hiding him in Vegas, we get on the jet right now. We tear apart every casino, every back room, every rat hole she owns until we find him and end this." "Nick, stop," Adam said, his voice low and authoritative, snapping into survival mode. "You're reacting on emotion. You don't know Risa. You don't know how she operates." "I know she's financing the man who is trying to destroy my life," Nick roared, spinning around to face Adam, his chest heaving. "I don't give a damn about your nostalgic memories of your time as a degenerate gambler, Adam. She is the enemy. We need to strike now, tonight, before they realize Nikki has breached their network and they disappear into the wind." Nick's impatience was a palpable, dangerous entity in the room. He was a man pushed to the absolute brink, his rationality eroding with every passing second. He was ready to start a war regardless of the casualties, regardless of the legal or physical fallout. He just wanted the nightmare to end. Adam stepped directly into Nick's path, forcing his older brother to stop pacing. The height and build of the two Newman men were nearly matched, but the energy they radiated was entirely different. Nick was a roaring, uncontrollable fire. Adam was absolute calculating ice. "Listen to me," Adam said, his tone deadly serious. He looked Nick dead in the eye, stripping away the usual sarcasm, the bitterness, and the decades of sibling rivalry. "I promise you on my life, on Connor's life, that we are going to catch Matt Clark. He is going to pay for every single thing he has done to you, to Sharon, to all of us. I am not going to let him win." Nick swallowed hard, his breathing ragged, momentarily anchored by the raw, unfiltered sincerity in Adam's vow. "But," Adam continued, his voice hardening into a tactical command, "we cannot go in guns blazing. This changes the entire board, Nick. If Risa is the one pulling the strings, she will see us coming a mile away. Her security is impenetrable. She owns half the cops in Clark County. If you spook her, she will put Matt on a private plane to a country without an extradition treaty before our jet even touches down at McCarran. The blunt force approach will fail. It will get us killed, or worse, it will let Matt escape forever." "So what's the brilliant plan, Adam?" Nick mocked his impatience, flaring up again, the brief moment of brotherhood dissolving into desperate frustration. "We just sit here and wait. We sent her a polite email asking her to hand over a psychopath." "No," Adam replied, his mind racing as he adjusted the tactical board in his head, calculating the terrifying risks. "We use the one thing she doesn't know we have. We use her blind spot." "Which is?" Nikki asked, stepping closer, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Me," Adam said softly, the weight of the word hanging heavily in the room. "Spider." Nick let out a harsh, bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Oh, perfect. So the great Adam Newman is going to go play poker with his old buddy and ask her nicely to stop funding a terrorist. Are you out of your mind?" "I'm going to talk to her," Adam corrected, his eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity that belonged entirely to his Vegas alter ego. "I need to understand what the hell is going on. Risa is ruthless, yes, but she is a businesswoman. She doesn't take on massive radioactive liabilities like Matt Clark without a massive payoff, or unless she's being blackmailed. I need to look her in the eye and find out why she is doing this." "No," Nick shouted, slamming his hand down on the glass coffee table, the impact echoing sharply. "We don't talk to her. We corner her. We threaten her with the feds, with the SEC, with whatever it takes to break her." "You threaten Risa Thompson and she will bury you in the desert." Adam fired back, his own temper finally snapping, his voice rising to match Nick's. "You don't understand the world she operates in, Nick. You're a corporate suit playing in the mud." "I lived in that mud. She trusted me. She still thinks of me as the man I was. I can get past her defenses. I can get her to slip up and reveal Matt's exact location without triggering her alarms." "It's too risky," Nick argued, his face flushed with anger, stepping so close to Adam they were practically breathing the same air. "You're just looking for an excuse to go back to Vegas, to go back to the dark. You're going to get sucked right back into her web, and Matt is going to slip right through our fingers while you're reminiscing about the good old days." "I am doing this to save your life," Adam roared, the raw emotion tearing from his throat. The brothers stood chest to chest, the air crackling with unresolved trauma, desperate fear, and a terrifying lack of time. Nikki watched them, her heart breaking, knowing that this was the very destruction Matt Clark had intended all along, tearing the family apart from the inside. "I am going to Vegas," Adam stated, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, his decision absolute and final. "And I am going to sit down with Risa Thompson, alone. Until I understand exactly what her endgame is, no one makes a move against her. If you go behind my back, Nick, you will lose our only advantage." Nick glared at him, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were bone white. He was out of patience, out of time, and terrifyingly close to taking matters into his own hands regardless of Adam's warnings. The war for the Newman family's survival had just shifted to the neon-lit desert, and the collateral damage was entirely unpredictable. The heavy mahogany grandfather clock in the foyer of the Abbott mansion ticked with a rhythmic mocking precision each second, amplifying the suffocating silence of the sprawling estate. Traci Abbott paced the length of the Persian rug in the living room, her usually warm and comforting demeanor entirely consumed by a frantic, jagged energy. She clutched her smartphone so tightly her knuckles were white, her thumb hovering over Billy's contact name before she dialed it for the 4th time in the past hour. "Billy, it's me again," Traci said, her voice tight with an anxiety that bordered on hysteria the moment his voicemail beeped. "You told me hours ago that you and Sally had a lead at the marina. Why haven't I heard back? You cannot leave me in the dark like this. We cannot just sit around waiting for the police to file another useless report while Jack is out there missing. Call me the second you get this." "I don't care what Diane or Kyle are doing at Society. We need to act now." She ended the call, tossing the phone onto the velvet sofa, and pressed the heels of her hands against her throbbing temples. The pressure in her chest was unbearable. Jack Abbott, the patriarch of their family, her protector and her anchor, had simply vanished. The not knowing was a slow, agonizing poison. She had spent the last 48 hours pressuring everyone in Genoa City, demanding answers from the local authorities, pushing her nephew Kyle to leverage every corporate resource Jabot had, and relentlessly hounding Billy to follow every dangerous shadow he could find. Traci felt like she was the only one holding the crumbling walls of the Abbott family together, but inside she was rapidly fracturing. Outside the imposing iron gates of the Abbott estate, a sleek black town car rolled to a silent halt. Nikki Newman sat in the back seat, staring out at the familiar brick facade of the mansion she had once called home. The biting Wisconsin winter wind whipped through the bare branches of the oak trees, but the chill that settled deep into Nikki's bones had nothing to do with the weather. It was the icy, paralyzing realization of what her husband had done. Nikki closed her eyes, the bitter argument at the newly rebuilt Newman Ranch playing on a relentless loop in her mind. She had confronted Victor after piecing together the breadcrumbs of his latest, most diabolical scheme. He hadn't just orchestrated a corporate takeover. He had crossed a line so dark, so unforgivable, that Nikki felt physically ill. Victor had kidnapped Jack. Worse still, he had trapped Jack on a secluded yacht in the middle of Lake Michigan with Patty Williams. Patty. The very name sent a shudder down Nikki's spine. To weaponize a woman with such profound mental instability, a woman whose tragic and violent history with Jack had left deep scars on everyone involved, was a level of cruelty that Nikki could not stomach. For hours, she had tried to convince herself that she could manage this, that she could handle Victor privately without blowing up their marriage again. But as she sat outside the Abbott mansion, the weight of her complicity crushed her. She could not hide the truth anymore. She could not let Traci, a woman she deeply respected and cared for, drown in this manufactured agony, while Victor played God from his leather chair. Steeling herself, Nikki stepped out of the car and made her way to the front door. When Mrs. Martinez ushered her into the living room, Nikki's breath hitched. Traci was standing by the fireplace, staring blankly at the portrait of her late father, John Abbott. When she turned, the sheer devastation on Traci's face made Nikki's heart shatter. Traci looked as though she had aged 10 years in 2 days. Her skin was ashen, her eyes bloodshot and swollen, and her usually immaculate posture was stooped under the invisible weight of her terror. "Nikki," Traci whispered, her voice cracking. The sudden intrusion of a Newman into the Abbott sanctuary would normally spark a defensive fire, but Traci had no fight left in her. The dam broke. A ragged sob tore from Traci's throat and her knees buckled. Nikki rushed forward, bridging the decades of family rivalry in an instant, and caught Traci by the shoulders, guiding her gently onto the sofa. "I've got you, Traci." "I'm here," Nikki murmured, wrapping her arms around the trembling woman. "He's gone." Nikki Traci wept, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with the force of her despair. "Jack is just gone. Nobody knows anything. Billy is chasing ghosts at the marina. Diana's losing her mind, and I feel like I am losing him all over again. I can't survive losing another sibling. I just can't." Nikki held her tighter, her own eyes burning with unshed tears. The hypocrisy of her comfort felt like a physical weight pressing against her chest. She was holding the sister of the man her husband had stolen from the world. "Traci, listen to me," Nikki said, softly pulling back just enough to force Traci to look into her eyes. "You need to breathe. Look at me." Traci blinked through her tears, confused by the sudden intense urgency in Nikki's tone. "What is it?" Nikki swallowed hard, her throat dry. Every instinct of self-preservation, every vow she had made to protect the Newman Empire screamed at her to stay quiet. But looking at Traci's broken spirit, Nikki made her choice. "I shouldn't be here, Nikki," began her voice dropping to a hushed, conspiratorial whisper. "If you knew I was telling you this, the fallout would be catastrophic. But I can't keep this to myself anymore. I can't watch you suffer like this." Traci's breath caught in her throat. She sat up straighter, her tear-stained face suddenly pale with a desperate, terrifying hope. "What are you saying, Nikki? Do you know something? Do you know where my brother is?" "I know he is alive," Nikki said, her voice trembling slightly but laced with absolute certainty. Traci let out a gasp that sounded like a drowning woman, finally breaking the surface of the water. She pressed her hand over her mouth, her eyes widening. "But you need to prepare yourself, Traci," Nikki continued, carefully navigating the minefield of her revelation. "I know roughly where Jack is being held, and I know who is responsible for this." Nikki paused the silence in the room, stretching until it felt like a taut wire ready to snap. "It's Victor. Victor is behind all of this." The emotional whiplash struck Traci with the force of a physical blow. For one fleeting, beautiful second, she had felt a profound, intoxicating relief. Asterisk, Jack is alive. Asterisk, he hadn't suffered a heart attack alone in an alley. He hadn't been the victim of a random fatal mugging. He was breathing. But the moment the name times Victor Newman times left Nikki's lips, that relief instantly curdled into pure, unadulterated panic. Victor Traci breathed the name, tasting like ash in her mouth. She pushed herself back against the cushions, her mind reeling as she stared at Nikki in bewildered horror. Victor took him. Why? After everything they've been through, after the truce, why now? What does that monster want this time? Is it Jabot? Is he trying to punish Diane? Traci's bewilderment quickly morphed into a frantic, chaotic terror. She knew the history. Whenever Victor Newman decided to play his twisted games with Jack, the stakes were never just corporate. They were psychological. They were lethal. "Where is he, Nikki?" Traci demanded, her voice rising in panic, the soft-spoken novelist completely eclipsed by the fiercely protective Abbott's sister. "Tell me exactly where he is right now. I will call Christine. I will call Paul. We will send the authorities to tear down whatever fortress Victor has him locked in." "No, Traci, wait." Nikki grabbed Traci's hands, squeezing them tightly to ground her. "You cannot involve the police. Not yet. If Victor gets even a hint that the authorities are closing in, he will move Jack. He has the resources to make Jack disappear permanently, and we might never find him again." "Then what do we do?" Traci cried out, her frustration boiling over. "You just told me my brother is a prisoner of your husband." "I am going to help you get him back," Nikki promised, her voice fiercely determined. "But I don't have all the answers yet. I only have pieces." Nikki took a deep, steadying breath, knowing the next part would push Traci to the edge. "Victor has Jack on a yacht. It's somewhere out in the middle of Lake Michigan. And he's not alone, Traci. Victor orchestrated this specifically to trap Jack with someone from his past. I have reason to believe he is being held with Patty Williams." The color drained entirely from Traci's face. "Patty," she whispered, the horror of the revelation paralyzing her vocal cords. "Oh my God, Patty!" "Victor is hiding the exact details," Nikki explained, rapidly desperate to keep Traci focused. "The lake is massive, and Victor has masked the vessel's registration, its GPS, tracking everything. I know the general situation, but I don't have the coordinates. If we send the Coast Guard out blind, Victor will know. I need to find out exactly where that yacht is. I promise you, Traci, I will share every single piece of information with you the second I have it, but I have to go back and find the details Victor is hiding." Traci stood up abruptly, tearing her hands away from Nikki's grasp. The sorrow that had been drowning her just moments ago was instantly incinerated by a blinding, protective rage. "You have to fix this," Nikki Traci demanded, her voice ringing with an authoritative steel that echoed through the large room. "You have to make this right, and you have to do it quickly. Every single second Jack is out there on that water, his life is on the line. You know exactly what Victor is capable of."